The moving truck pulled away from the curb as I stood in my driveway, Buddy sitting attentively at my side. After 3 years of medical treatments that drained both my bank account and my spirit, I had finally found what seemed like the perfect place to heal: Willow Oaks. The neighborhood was exactly what the real estate agent had promised: neat rows of craftsman-style homes, tree-lined streets, and a sense of order that felt comforting after years of chaos in my life. Buddy nudged my hand, his trained alert that I needed to take my medication. He was not just a dog. He was my medical alert service animal, trained to detect changes in my body chemistry before my episode struck. More importantly, he had been the only constant presence during the darkest days of my illness. I patted his head gratefully and pulled out my pill organizer. "Nice dog," called a voice from across the street. An elderly man waved from his garden. "Welcome to the neighborhood. I am Robert." I waved back, feeling a flutter of hope. "Thank you. I am Alexandra and this is Buddy. He is my service dog." Robert smiled warmly. "Well, you both picked a nice place to settle down. Mostly quiet here. Mostly." Something in his tone made me curious, but before I could ask what he meant, a woman walking a toy poodle approached from down the street. "Good morning, Robert," she greeted, her voice pleasant but tight. She turned to me, eyes immediately darting to Buddy, then to my yard where moving boxes were still scattered. "You must be the new homeowner. Welcome to Willow Oaks." Her smile did not reach her eyes. She wore a pink jogging suit that looked as if it had never seen a drop of sweat. Her blonde hair was pulled into a perfect ponytail, not a strand out of place. The clipboard she carried seemed more like a weapon than an organizational tool. "Thank you, I am Alexandra," I repeated, extending my hand. "Karen Whitfield," she replied, her handshake brief. "HOA President." She emphasized the title with unmistakable pride. "I see you have a dog. I hope you have reviewed our pet guidelines." "Buddy is actually a service dog," I explained, patting his vest emblazoned with service animal patches. "He is registered and certified." Karen's eyes narrowed slightly. "Well, service animal or not, we have strict policies about animal waste, barking, and proper leash length. I will email you the complete pet addendum." Her gaze swept across my yard. "And you will want to get those boxes inside. The HOA does not permit outdoor storage or clutter." "I just moved in this morning," I said, trying to keep my tone light. "Of course, just a friendly reminder. We pride ourselves on maintaining property values here." She glanced at her watch. "The board meets next Thursday if you have any questions. Have a lovely day." As she walked away, clipboard clutched to her chest, I felt a strange uneasiness settle over me. Robert caught my eye and gave me a look that seemed to say, "You will get used to it." I brushed off the encounter. Every neighborhood had its characters, I reasoned. Besides, I had dealt with far worse than an overzealous HOA president during my years of illness. What harm could she really do? That evening, as I unpacked in the kitchen, I heard Buddy growl low in his throat, a sound I had rarely heard him make. He stood at the window, fur slightly raised, staring at something outside. When I looked, I caught a glimpse of pink disappearing around the corner of my fence. "It is okay, boy," I reassured him, though something about his reaction unsettled me. Buddy was trained not to react to people or other animals unless there was a threat. In 3 years, I had never known him to growl without cause. I dismissed it as new home jitters. We were both adjusting to unfamiliar surroundings. But as I patted Buddy's head, I could not shake the feeling that his instincts were trying to tell me something important, something I had missed in my encounter with Karen. That was the first red flag. I should have paid more attention. The first official notice appeared on my door exactly 7 days after moving in. A pink paper with the HOA letterhead, filled with bureaucratic language citing violations of sections 4.3, 7.2, and 11.6 of the community guidelines. The offenses were vague: improper lawn maintenance, unapproved exterior features, and animal nuisance concerns. I stared at the paper, confused. My lawn had been professionally landscaped by the previous owner. There were no exterior modifications, and Buddy rarely made a sound, let alone enough noise to qualify as a nuisance. I pulled out my phone and dialed the HOA office number listed at the bottom. No answer. I tried again later that afternoon. Voicemail. The next morning, voicemail. By the third day, I had left 4 messages requesting clarification. None were returned. Instead, I received an email with an attached fine of $150 for failure to address violations in a timely manner. While walking Buddy that evening, I noticed Karen standing in her driveway across the street, phone raised in our direction. She was not even trying to be subtle about photographing us. Buddy's ears perked up, but he remained calm, the consummate professional even as my own irritation grew. "Excuse me," I called, crossing the street toward her. "I have been trying to reach someone about these supposed violations. Can you tell me exactly what the issues are?" Karen lowered her phone with deliberate slowness. "The issues are clearly stated in the notice. Section 4.3 prohibits unkempt lawn areas. Your left flower bed has 3 dead marigolds. Section 7.2 forbids unauthorized fixtures. Your hose is not on an approved hose reel. And Section 11.6 addresses animal nuisance. Your dog barked at 7:43 yesterday morning." "He barked once at a squirrel," I said, struggling to keep my voice level. "And I have not had time to learn every subsection of a 100-page HOA manual. I just moved in." "Ignorance of the rules is not an exemption from them," Karen replied, her voice honey-coated steel. "Rules exist for a reason. Without them, property values decline. Is that what you want? To devalue your neighbor's greatest investments?" Before I could respond, another notification chimed on my phone. Another violation. Another fine. This one for confrontational behavior toward HOA leadership. That night, I met my neighbor Sarah while retrieving my mail. Her sympathetic smile told me she had witnessed the earlier encounter. "I would not take it personally," she said softly, glancing over her shoulder as if afraid of being overheard. "Karen does this to everyone new, especially if she senses any weakness." "Weakness?" I asked. Sarah hesitated. "You know, single homeowners, people with health issues, anyone she thinks cannot fight back." She looked down at Buddy, who sat patiently at my side. "She especially hates pets. The Johnsons moved out last year after their retriever was accused of destroying community landscaping. No proof, just Karen's word. The Patels left after constant fines for their daughter's therapy cat, the Williamses." "Wait," I interrupted. "Are you saying she deliberately targets certain residents?" Sarah's eyes darted nervously toward Karen's house. "I have said too much already. Just document everything, and maybe get cameras." She hurried back to her house, leaving me standing there with a growing sense of dread. The next day, I tried attending the HOA board meeting to plead my case. To my shock, the 5-person board consisted of Karen as president, her husband as treasurer, her best friend as secretary, and 2 elderly neighbors who appeared to be asleep for most of the proceedings. When I raised concerns about the arbitrary nature of the violations, Karen smiled thinly. "The board has reviewed your complaints and found them without merit. Next item on the agenda." Just like that, no discussion, no vote, no recourse. Walking home that evening, I noticed Karen's car driving slowly alongside us. Buddy stiffened, a low rumble building in his chest. Through the window, I could see her watching us, her gaze fixed not on me but on Buddy. The look in her eyes made my blood run cold. That night, I installed a doorbell camera, the first of many security measures I would soon need. 3 weeks into my residence at Willow Oaks, I began to notice strange items appearing near my fence line. At first, it was just scraps, a chicken bone here, a piece of bread there. I assumed it was neighborhood litter or perhaps wildlife dragging food around. Then one morning, I found something deliberately placed, a small pile of meat scraps tucked just inside the corner of my yard where my fence met the sidewalk. They were fresh, not weathered or scattered like garbage would be. Buddy immediately showed interest, pulling toward the scraps with unusual eagerness. "Leave it," I commanded firmly, pulling him away. Something about the placement felt deliberate. I collected the meat using a plastic bag and disposed of it, making a mental note to watch for more. 2 days later, it happened again. This time, the meat scraps were pushed partially under the fence, as if someone wanted to ensure they would not be immediately visible from the street. I disposed of these as well, my suspicion growing. The third time, I found what looked like meatballs, clearly homemade, in the same spot. This time, I collected them in a clean container and put them in my freezer, an uneasy feeling settling in my stomach. The following morning, Buddy and I took our usual walk. Everything seemed normal until we returned home. Buddy went straight to his water bowl, drinking more frantically than usual. Within 20 minutes, his behavior changed. First came the lethargy, then the whimpering, and finally, violent vomiting that left him trembling on the kitchen floor. My hands shook as I lifted his 90-pound frame into the car. The emergency veterinarian took one look at him and rushed him into the treatment area. I paced the waiting room for 3 hours before the doctor emerged, her expression grave. "Your dog has been poisoned," she stated flatly. "The blood work shows elevated levels of bromthalin, a neurotoxic rodenticide. Fortunately, you brought him in quickly, and the amount in his system suggests only minimal exposure. With treatment, he should recover fully." My mind raced back to the meat I had found, the meat I had stopped Buddy from eating. If that had been poisoned too. "Someone tried to poison my dog," I whispered, the reality of it hitting me like a physical blow. The veterinarian's face softened with sympathy. "I have to ask, do you have any neighbors with a grudge? This type of poisoning is rarely accidental." Karen's face immediately flashed in my mind. Her slow drive-bys, her fixed stare at Buddy, the warnings from other neighbors. I filed a report with the HOA the next day, detailing the poisoning incident and my suspicions about the planted food. I included the veterinarian's report and a $1,200 bill for emergency treatment. Karen reviewed the documents in my presence, her face a mask of professional concern. "This is certainly disturbing," she said, placing the papers into a folder without really reading them. "However, without evidence of who might have done this, there is little the HOA can do. Perhaps your dog got into something on your walks, or maybe you have rodent bait somewhere in your home you have forgotten about." "I do not use rodent poison," I stated firmly, and the vet confirmed this was deliberately administered in food. "Well," Karen sighed, "I will file this report but without proof of the responsible party." She gave a helpless shrug that did nothing to mask the satisfaction in her eyes. As I turned to leave, another resident entering the office stopped me with a light touch on my arm. It was Margaret, an older woman from 2 streets over. "I overheard," she whispered. "I saw her, dear, early yesterday morning before her power walk. Pink tracksuit, gloves on despite the warm weather, by your fence." My heart pounded. "Karen, you saw Karen by my fence." Margaret nodded, then glanced toward the office door. "I cannot get involved. I am sorry." She hurried away, leaving me with the first tangible confirmation of my suspicions. That night, I emptied my savings account and purchased a comprehensive security system: 4 high-definition cameras with night vision capability, motion detection, and cloud storage. I installed them strategically: one at the front door, one overlooking the backyard, one aimed at the side fence where the meat had been found, and one hidden in a bird feeder with a view of the street. For 5 days, nothing appeared on the footage except neighborhood cats and the occasional delivery person. Then, on the 6th morning at 5:47 a.m., the side camera activated. The footage showed a figure in a pink jogging outfit approaching my fence. Gloved hands reached through the slats, depositing something in the exact spot where I had found the previous meat scraps. The face turned upward for a moment, directly into the camera. "Karen." I felt sick and vindicated all at once. I had proof, irrefutable proof, that the HOA president was systematically attempting to harm my service animal. The question was, what would I do with it? The local police station was quiet when I arrived, footage and veterinary reports in hand. Officer Martinez listened patiently as I explained the situation, occasionally making notes. When I finished, he reviewed the video several times. "I see someone placing something near your fence," he finally said. "But the video does not clearly show what the object is. Without testing the substance and confirming it contains the same poison found in your dog, this is circumstantial at best." "But you can see it is her," I insisted. "The same woman who has been harassing me since I moved in. The same woman others have seen by my fence." "Hearsay," he replied gently. "Ms. Whitfield could claim she was picking up trash, adjusting a sprinkler head, or any number of innocent activities. Without the actual substance and lab confirmation linking it to your dog's poisoning, we cannot make an arrest." I left the station defeated but determined. The system might require more evidence, but I now knew exactly what I was dealing with and who. When I returned home, another violation notice waited on my door. This one cited unauthorized surveillance equipment and demanded immediate removal of my security cameras. The fine was $500. The next day, a certified letter arrived from an attorney representing the Willow Oaks HOA, threatening legal action for persistent violations of community standards and creating a hostile environment. Buddy, once eager for our walks, now cowered when I reached for his leash. The poisoning had left more than physical damage. His trust in our surroundings was shattered. He would stand at the door, trembling, refusing to step outside. For a service dog trained to be confident in all situations, this regression was alarming. More alarming was how it affected my own health. Without Buddy's willingness to go outside, I was missing the exercise my doctor had prescribed. Without his alerts, I had experienced 2 minor episodes that might have been prevented. I began documenting everything, every fine, every letter, every interaction. I started a spreadsheet tracking dates, times, and details. I recorded phone conversations. I photographed my property daily to prove there were no legitimate violations. I researched animal cruelty laws, harassment statutes, and the Americans with Disabilities Act as it pertained to service animals. The more I researched, the clearer it became. Karen was not just being a difficult neighbor. She was systematically violating federal law by interfering with a service animal. Under the ADA, Buddy was considered medical equipment, as essential to my well-being as a wheelchair or oxygen tank. Tampering with him was not just cruel, it was illegal. My health began to deteriorate under the constant stress. My chronic condition flared, landing me in the emergency room after a particularly severe episode. One buddy might have alerted me to had he not been too traumatized to function properly. The doctor noted the correlation between stress and symptom severity, recommending I remove myself from the stressful environment. As if it were that simple. As if I could just walk away from my home, my sanctuary that was becoming a prison. That night, lying in bed with Buddy curled protectively at my side, I reached a decision. I would not be driven out. I would not be broken. This was not just about neighborhood politics anymore. This was about survival. Mine and Buddy's. "We are going to fight back," I whispered to Buddy, scratching behind his ears. "Not just for us, but for the Johnsons, the Patels, the Williamses, and everyone else she has tormented." For the first time in weeks, I felt something other than fear and frustration. I felt purpose. Karen had chosen the wrong person to target. She thought my illness made me vulnerable. She did not realize it had made me resilient. She thought my quiet demeanor meant I would not fight back. She did not understand that the quietest people often have the strongest resolve. I opened my laptop and began to type. If evidence was what the police needed, evidence was what I would provide. Irrefutable, undeniable, and overwhelming. The weakness in my initial security setup had been obvious in hindsight. The cameras were visible, their purpose transparent. Karen had spotted them immediately and retaliated through official channels. My new approach would be different. I invested in 3 additional cameras, professional-grade equipment with enhanced night vision, motion activation, and timestamps. These I concealed more strategically. One disguised as a decorative rock placed near the fence line, another hidden in the branches of a shrub overlooking the yard, and a third incorporated into what appeared to be an ordinary garden gnome. To supplement the video evidence, I installed pressure-sensitive mats beneath the soil along the fence line, the kind used in security systems to detect intruders. These would record exactly when and where someone stepped, providing additional verification of presence. Then I waited, patient, methodical, determined. 3 days passed with no activity. Then 4. On the 5th morning at 5:12 a.m., my phone alerted me to motion at the fence line. I watched in real time as Karen approached, glanced around to ensure she was unobserved, and carefully placed what appeared to be several small meatballs through the slats of the fence. The pressure mat confirmed movement exactly where she stood. The rock camera captured clear footage of her face and the items in her hand. I waited until she left, then went outside wearing gloves and retrieved the meatballs using tongs, placing them in a sealed evidence bag. I labeled it with the date and time, then stored it in my freezer alongside the others I had collected. The pattern continued. Every 3rd or 4th day, always before sunrise, Karen would make her delivery. Each time, I documented and collected the evidence without confrontation. By the 2nd week, I had 7 samples and over 20 distinct video clips from multiple angles, all clearly showing the same person engaged in the same suspicious activity. It was time for the next phase. I contacted a private laboratory specializing in toxicology and arranged for testing of the samples. The results arrived a week later, confirming what I had suspected. The meatballs contained bromtholin, the same rodenticide found in Buddy's blood work, at levels high enough to be lethal to a dog of his size with repeated exposure. Armed with the lab results, time-stamped video evidence, pressure mat data, and veterinary reports, I compiled a comprehensive file. I included statements from Margaret and Sarah, who had finally agreed to go on record about what they had witnessed. I added documentation of every fine, every letter, every threat levied against me since moving in. I included research on the ADA and service animal protections. I printed photographs of Buddy's medical episode and hospital bills resulting from the poisoning. The file was nearly 2 inches thick when I returned to the police station and requested Officer Martinez. "I believe this addresses your concerns about circumstantial evidence," I said calmly, placing the file on his desk. He reviewed the contents slowly, his expression growing increasingly grave. When he reached the lab results, he looked up. "This is thorough," he said finally. "Necessary," I corrected. "I need you to understand, this is not a neighborhood squabble. This is systematic harassment and attempted harm to a service animal, which constitutes a federal offense." Officer Martinez nodded, picking up his phone. "I need to bring my sergeant in on this." He paused, looking at me with newfound respect. "For what it is worth, this is one of the most comprehensive cases of civilian-gathered evidence I have seen." 3 days later, Karen was called in for questioning. I was not present, but Sarah texted me from across the street. "Police car at Karen's house. She just left with them. Not in handcuffs, but not smiling either." By that evening, news had spread throughout Willow Oaks. Residents gathered in small clusters, sharing stories and speculations. The neighborhood watch group chat exploded with messages of support for me and revelations about others who had suffered under Karen's reign. For the first time since moving in, I felt the community rallying around me rather than watching from behind closed blinds. The wall of fear Karen had built was beginning to crumble, and in its place, something new was emerging: solidarity. The emergency HOA board meeting was called 3 days after Karen's police interview. Normally held in the small community clubhouse, this meeting had to be moved to the local elementary school gymnasium to accommodate the unprecedented turnout. Nearly every household in Willow Oaks was represented. Some residents I had never even seen before emerged from their homes for this momentous occasion. I arrived early with Buddy, who still stuck close to my side but seemed to sense the shift in energy. Several neighbors approached to pet him and offer words of encouragement. Robert, the elderly man who had first welcomed me to the neighborhood, sat beside me in silent support. Karen's husband Vernon opened the meeting, visibly uncomfortable in his temporary role as acting president. "In light of recent allegations," he began hesitantly, "Karen has voluntarily stepped back from her duties while this matter is resolved." A murmur rippled through the crowd. Voluntary was a generous interpretation. The police investigation had left the board little choice. "We will be conducting an internal review of all HOA activities and enforcement actions over the past 3 years," Vernon continued, avoiding eye contact with the audience. "In the meantime, all outstanding fines are suspended pending reevaluation." What followed was something I could never have anticipated. One by one, residents approached the microphone to share their experiences. A young mother described being fined because her daughter's wheelchair ramp violated architectural guidelines. An immigrant family detailed how they had been cited for ethnic cooking odors that supposedly disturbed neighbors. A retired veteran recounted receiving violations for flying an American flag outside approved patriotic holidays. The stories continued for over 2 hours, a catalog of petty tyrannies and targeted harassment that had been allowed to flourish because each victim thought they were alone. When the meeting finally adjourned, a local news van was parked outside. A reporter approached me as I exited with Buddy. "Alexandra Porter, we have received information about your situation with the HOA president. Would you be willing to comment? I had prepared for this moment. This is not just about me, I responded carefully. This is about accountability and ensuring that housing associations serve their communities rather than enabling abuse of power. My service dog was poisoned while performing his medical duties. That is not a neighborhood dispute. That is a crime. The story aired that evening on the 6 o'clock news. By morning, it had been picked up by national outlets. Overnight, Willow Oaks became the focal point of a broader conversation about HOA overreach and disability rights. My phone rang the next day. An attorney specializing in disability law offering to represent me pro bono in a civil case against both Karen personally and the HOA as an entity. What happened to you and your service animal is textbook discrimination under the Fair Housing Act and the ADA, he explained. You have a strong case for harassment, negligence, and intentional infliction of emotional distress. The lawsuit was filed the following week. Karen, now struggling to maintain her facade of neighborhood authority, confronted me one evening as I returned from walking Buddy, our first outing since the poisoning incidents. You have no idea what you have done, she hissed, stepping into my path on the sidewalk. 20 years I have kept this neighborhood perfect. 20 years of property values rising because of my work, and you destroy it all in 3 months. I removed my phone from my pocket, making sure she saw me activate the recording function. Is there something you would like to say to me, Ms. Whitfield? On the record. Her face contorted with rage, but the presence of the phone, and the reminder of how thoroughly I had documented her previous actions, gave her pause. She turned and stalked away, her pink tracksuit disappearing around the corner. The civil case moved more quickly than expected. During deposition, Karen maintained her innocence, claiming she had merely been checking the fence for maintenance issues and removing debris from the property line. When confronted with the lab results and timestamps that corresponded exactly with Buddy's poisoning, she insisted it was a coincidence. The judge was unconvinced. During the hearing for my restraining order request, he reviewed the evidence and stated bluntly, "The court finds the pattern of behavior exhibited by the defendant to be both deliberate and malicious, with specific intent to interfere with a federally protected service animal." The restraining order was granted. Karen was prohibited from coming within 100 feet of me, Buddy, or my property. The civil case continued, but this immediate protection allowed me to begin rebuilding a sense of security in my home. The settlement came 6 months after I filed my civil lawsuit. The terms were confidential, but included substantial damages, coverage of all my legal and medical expenses, and a complete restructuring of the Willow Oaks HOA governance system. The board was expanded from 5 members to 9, with term limits and transparent voting procedures. A separate appeals committee was established for residents contesting violations or fines. Karen never admitted guilt, but the consequences spoke for themselves. The criminal investigation resulted in misdemeanor charges for animal cruelty and harassment. She accepted a plea deal that included community service, a fine, and mandatory counseling. 2 weeks after the settlement, a for sale sign appeared in front of the Whitfield home. The asking price was well below market value, a final irony for someone who had terrorized an entire community in the name of property values. They moved out on a Tuesday. No one helped them load the moving truck. No one brought farewell casseroles or cards. The neighborhood watched in silence as the architect of so much fear and anxiety simply disappeared. In the aftermath, something unexpected happened. The community began to heal, not just from Karen's reign, but from the isolation her tactics had fostered. Neighbors who had kept to themselves for years started emerging, introducing themselves, sharing stories. The spring after Karen left, Willow Oaks held its first community picnic in over a decade. The new HOA president, Sarah, who had first warned me about Karen, arrived at my door one morning with a gift basket and an official letter. The board voted unanimously, she explained, handing me the envelope. Inside was a formal apology for the systemic harassment and discrimination I had experienced, along with a lifetime exemption from HOA dues. I appreciated the gesture, but what mattered more was the change I could see unfolding around me. I reinforced my fence with a secure, locked gate. I installed a permanent, professional security system. I replanted my garden with flowers that attracted butterflies, the kind Karen had once cited as non-conforming vegetation. Slowly, Buddy began to recover his confidence. The hypervigilance faded. He stopped trembling at sudden movements. He resumed his medical alerts with his former accuracy. We extended our walks, exploring parts of the neighborhood we had avoided during the worst of the conflict. My own health improved as the stress diminished. The episodes became less frequent, less severe. I found myself sleeping through the night again, no longer startled awake by every sound outside my window. One evening, as Buddy and I sat on the front porch enjoying the sunset, Robert walked by with his wife. "The neighborhood feels different now," he commented, pausing at my gate. "Lighter somehow." "It does," I agreed, "though I wish it had not taken all of this to make that happen. Sometimes systems need to break before they can be rebuilt properly," he replied sagely. "What you did not just help you, it helped all of us." His words stayed with me. In the weeks that followed, I started a blog documenting my experience, careful to focus on the systemic issues rather than personal attacks. The response was overwhelming. Messages poured in from across the country, people sharing similar stories, seeking advice, offering support. With the encouragement of my attorney, I formed an advocacy group focused on HOA reform and service animal protections. We provided resources for homeowners facing discrimination, connected them with legal support, and pushed for legislative changes to prevent others from experiencing what I had. A year to the day after Buddy's poisoning, we took a walk around the entire neighborhood, something we had never been able to do when Karen lived there. Residents waved and called greetings. Children asked to pet him. Other dog owners stopped to chat. Standing at the top of the hill overlooking Willow Oaks, I reflected on how close I had come to losing everything: my health, my home, my beloved companion. How a place that was meant to be a sanctuary had nearly become a battlefield. But in fighting back, I had found something I never expected: a true community. Buddy sat beside me, alert but relaxed, his service vest gleaming in the afternoon sun. The trauma would always be part of our story, but it no longer defined us. We had reclaimed our peace, not the false peace of fearful compliance, but the genuine peace that comes from justice served and lessons learned. Together we walked home unafraid.